Use permit ordinance amendment.
All right, so this is a kind of a dual effort here between myself and the city attorney. And so if we're on the item, here we go.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're good. Welcome.
Well, welcome. So good evening, Mayor, members of the council. So Ben Moody, your Development Services Director, in partnership with the city attorney, Shannon Chaffin, will present this item. Basically, at your January 21st meeting, council provided direction to staff to look at providing an ordinance amendment that would give a tool to the council to basically have an option in our use permit process to allow direct review by council, should council deem that necessary for the community to streamline or to provide community benefit. And so through this process tonight, we're introducing an ordinance that would provide that option for you, and city attorney can provide some technical background on that.
Thank you, Council. If you don't mind, I'll jump in at this particular point. This is the same ordinance that was before you when you initiated it. There have not been any changes. However, this matter was presented to the Planning Commission for recommendation. After due consideration and extensive discussion, the Planning Commission did recommend against approving it on a 6-1 vote. Nothing as far as there are no additional recommendations that were made by the Planning Commission with regards to any sort of modifications associated with this item. And I'm available for any questions at your convenience.
Thank you very much. Anybody from the public care to comment? All right, we can bring back to council for any other comments or a motion.
Through the mayor, first I'd like to thank Mr. Moody. I did listen to the audio file of the discussion at the Planning Commission, and I thought both you and the city attorney did a nice job of trying to explain the intent of this council in regards to this conditional use permit ordinance. I found the discussion at the Planning Commission concerning, in as much as for whatever reason, and I'm not exactly sure why, there was some concern that this council was trying to abolish the Planning Commission. I'm not sure where that comes from. It certainly didn't come from any discussions that I've had with any of my 4 colleagues up here. And so I'm struggling to understand where they were headed with those discussions. I'm a little concerned about the fact that they were concerned about lack of communication. My recollection of this item is it's been something that has been off and on discussed since January of 2019. And if there was such a concern, why none of us, well, I was not contacted in regards to what my motivation or intentions were in supporting this ordinance. There were, and I'm going to use the term, accusations of good old boy, and this was all political. I assure you I am not a good old boy, and I assure you there is no political motivation in my support of this particular ordinance. This is simply a tool in the toolbox that it would take 3 of us up here to execute on should we think or feel that an item could be expedited through a development process to move it forward. I will again mention that one of the priorities of this council is to be open for business and to facilitate development. And the notion that this would be picked and choose for some other reason other than that, to me, does not sit well, frankly. I think there's a level of communication that's going to need to occur between the Planning Commission and members of this council. I think we owe that to them, in as much as they seem to be confused about what our intent is, and we're apparently without any recommendations coming back from them or changing, just a flat no with the exception of one planning commissioner. It just confuses me that they couldn't come up with something other than good old boy and politicians. That being said, I am full support of this ordinance. I would certainly offer up to the mayor to be one of those that meets with the Planning Commission. This is something, frankly, that without casting any aspersions towards anyone, something I've asked for since almost since the time I was elected. The Planning Commission is a body that's appointed by the council and should they should be representatives of the city, but they also need to be representatives of the goals and objectives of the council as well. We are working very hard with the development community to work with them on things like impact fees and streamlining the opportunity to build and bring not only new business, but retain existing businesses as well. And I think we need to make sure that our planning commission is aligned with the goals and priorities of the city council. Thank you.
Thank you. Very well said. Anybody else?
Through the mayor, I also listened to, and it is clear that, at least in my opinion, and listening and hearing throughout, we have done multiple workshops to bring our commissions and boards to be aligned within the priorities that we set forth, which we did in a manner that I think was allowing to bring in a variety of folks to give input to those priorities. And I sense that there is some confusion or some differences of vision of what we believe as council members and what our planning commissioners are considering at this point. I think that, Agenda 10, we're going to talk about, the boards and the commissions on other items, but I'd like to maybe suggest at this moment that in there, maybe we need to have some sort of a workshop to help our commissioners understand the priorities and how we are aligned as a council to those priorities. And hopefully that would help with some of the miscommunication or misunderstandings in this. And at first I was really hesitant with this particular amendment, and I've gone through and looked at it closer, and this is an opportunity for us to maybe think out of the box, honestly, innovation that is probably not happening. So it's an opportunity for us that maybe we should consider. Let's not throw it out yet. And I'd be willing to explore this, because there's also a sunset. It's not a long-term ordinance. There is an end date to it. I would be more concerned if there was a long-term date set to this. But I believe that there needs to be a better opportunity for us as city council and planning commissioners to be much more aligned. And I think the representation of that is allowing, future commissioners that perhaps we are able to, as each individual council, be able to recommend individuals for those commissions and change the process that we have currently.
All right, thank you.
Through the mayor.
Yes.
I happened to be at the meeting, and how I took it is sort of like what Mark said, we're giving special treatment to certain folks, and someone puts theirs in 3 months ago, and then someone puts theirs in today, they can get pushed up the system quicker and something like that. And their concerns were it should be fair, it should be equal for everybody. They should go through the process, and there shouldn't be any moving up the ladder quickly type thing, is how I took it and how they kind of explained it to me afterwards. So I think we should sit down and just, like I said, we don't necessarily have to have a workshop, but how we could do it properly. We all sit down with all of them, have a discussion, and say, because they said, they're taking, the comments were made, they take the grunt for us, they do all the work for us, and then they present it to us, and now it's being taken away, and they kind of had their feelings hurt because it got moved up the chain quickly, is how I took it. So I think we just need to sit down and talk to them. It kind of, even though it was mentioned a few months ago, it caught them off guard, and that's how I got the interpretation with the group. Their feelings were hurt, and we're taking their job away from them. That's why they said, well, why do they have a planning commission? Because we're taking their job away from them. So that's how the comments I'd like to make about that.
All right, thank you. Yes, sir.
Through the mayor. First of all, Mr. Moody, thank you so much for the job you're doing. And I know you got caught in a interesting position last week. And but I will say I'm glad that you are the department head, and I'm glad that you are changing the culture with where we're going in development of this city. So kudos to you and thank you. I want to say that publicly. So where do we get back to this? It gets back to communication to start with. And with that, we have, as it's been expressed, had many workshops, many dialogue that's gone back and forward in expressing what the goals are, what the priorities are of this city, the fact that we are going to be open for business, the fact that we want to think outside of the box. And let's face it, people, in the last 8 to 9 years, there's been very little economic growth around here. And we have to kick this economy in the backside, because when we get to all the underlying issues that we have throughout the city, it all boils down to dollars and cents that was based upon the budget for years and years with economic growth happening. And we've got to get development started. That's what's going to bring people here. Then that's going to bring jobs here. And it's kind of this snowball effect. You get houses, you get jobs, you get technology, you get more money. It just, everything rolls and it works together as one engine. So with this, I can say that I'm kind of taken back by the fact that some of the planning commissioners did not realize that this has been in the works for a year. And this was not just something that was an idea that was, as it was said that night, spearheaded, by one council member. I was just the one that kept beating the drum. And Ben, this gets back to your leadership, because we asked for this out of the culture that was part of the city a year ago, and it basically died on the vine. And we kept asking for it to come back, and I really do appreciate you following through with the council's wishes and at least bringing it forward so we could have the discussion. So with that, I want to help clarify a couple of things. And Mr. Chaffin, can I question you on a couple of things, because there's been a lot of miscommunication.
Certainly.
And the first thing that I want to ask yourself, and I don't mean this as like an attorney judge type thing. I want clarification. I know you're our city attorney, but I want to know, what is your specialties, because you helped us with this process. So what is your expertise, sir?
My expertise is in planning and land use, including CEQA and environmental analysis.
Okay, so if that's your specialty, and with Esquire by your name and you being with a large legal firm, I suggest you're an expert in this.
Yes.
Okay. Following that, did this council not ask roughly a year ago for this to be worked on?
Yes, it was over a year ago by my recollection.
Okay. And then as we progress through this, you wrote this with such language that it has barriers in there to where not a single one of our council members can go rogue, so to speak, and take action on their own. It takes a majority of this council to do anything.
Without classifying about council members going rogue, I would say that it takes a majority of the council members to be able to act on this, yes.
There you go. It takes a majority of the council to take action on anything.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. With that, at any time, because it was implied when we listened to the tapes, that the council, as the vice mayor said, we've already heard through community that we want to do away with the planning commission. Was that ever said from this council and asked of you with this ordinance rewrite?
I have never received any such direction from the city council.
Okay, thank you, sir. And moving forward with your expertise, do you know of any cases that an express lane, so to speak, would be a benefit to economic growth in any of the cities that you've worked with in your career?
Yes, and there are some cities that do have an express lane of various different types.
Okay, thank you. I ask all those questions to really bring it back on High Center. This was never to do away with the Planning Commission. I want to thank them. They do a hell of a job. They have a lot of stacks of paperwork to go through, and they are an extension of this council. When you look in the California code, and Mr. Attorney, please correct me if I'm wrong on this, but when you look at the code, the Planning Commission is not a legislative body. The Planning Commission is an advisory commission that is an extension to review our general plan, our specific plans, make sure that we do development in line with those, and then make recommendations back to us. And then as an extension of that, they also hear matters concerning conditional use permits, make an opinion or a ruling on that is always appealable to the council. Am I correct?
Yes, generally correct.
And so this should be a collaborative role. And I go back to exactly what was said earlier. All it was a negative were taking their job, and that was never the impact. But, you know, they do a great job. It was all about trying to do what is in the best interest of this city. I referred back to a case that held this city at bay for over a year and talked about it would have been nice for it to just go straight to the council, because you went through the whole process and then you lost another month or two for it to come to the council and be appealed and everything. At the end of the day, Mr. Chaffin, the council is the only legislative, quasi-judicial. We set the policy and the parameters, correct?
That's correct. The council makes all the legislative determinations. No other body in the city has that authority. And then to the extent that the city council has designated certain authority to bodies, it has also reserved that authority in itself if there is an appeal.
Thank you for that clarification, because I forgot that that's an important fact, that we reserve our authority as the council. As we go through this, the case in point that I brought forward was a use permit that had 60 conditions attached to the back of it. And my simple point was, if that would have just had a fast track, it could have saved a couple of months and some heartache for the city. It wasn't about showing someone favor and using the good old NOI network, because as the vice mayor said, that's one of the precise reasons that I ran. I was tired of seeing that in this community. That culture had to change. So with that, we could, as a council, impose 100 conditions on a conditional use permit, and they're fine. We don't need an ordinance to impose conditions on a use permit.
Under the city's municipal code, if there's an appeal to the city council on a use permit, the city council has the same authority to impose conditions of approval.
Okay, thank you. Given all of that, all of the arguments that I heard the other night when I listened to the audio just, in my mind, do not make sense. We're not taking anybody's job. I want them to do their job. We have enough material to work through ourselves. We need to come together as a council and our commissions, understanding that their advisory roles to the council, and we're here to do what's in the best interest of this community, period. It's not about a good old boy network. God knows that's why we got into this, to tear that down, because there was too much of that happening. This is about doing what's right, getting economic growth going, and this may never be used. It may be used once. But if a project comes up that is already contentious before it ever hits the planning department, then we can rise up very quickly and say, instead of it having to be heard twice, we're just going to fast track it right to where it's going to be heard one and done, and we go forward. That's the only purpose of this. It is not to take away any of the jobs that the Planning Commission does, and I want to be very clear on that. I wasn't the one that was the instigator of this. I was just one of the 5 of us that said, you know what, this is a good idea to think outside of the box and do what's right for this city. So I just want to clear the air real fast from last week's meeting. We're not doing away with the Planning Commission. They have a job. They are appointed and they're an advisory commission. And then with that, Mr. Mayor, I think you know where I stand on this.
I have an idea.
Yeah.
All right.
The mayor,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to comment on Mr. Councilman Shaw's, what he just said. The point where you said that there was a project came through and there was 60 conditions on it. Those 60 conditions weren't made up and done by the council. It was, those 60 conditions were done on the department head that was in charge of our department at that time. And the department head suggested to the Planning Commission that these need to be done in order to make this project go forward. And they took the instructions from the department head at the time, thinking that, you know, has a little bit more knowledge than them, and that was a great thing. So it's not the Planning Commission that's slowing projects down. The department was a little understaffed at the time. We've just gone through it for the last year. We've had some issues with that department the last year, but it wasn't the Planning Commission's getting stuff taking too long. It was getting the paperwork to them and getting these projects to move forward. That was a comment that was made in the video or in the audio that you heard that night. It wasn't their fault. It was the department's that for that this last year or year and a half that's been going on. So I don't know. I sat there and listened to them. If you saw their faces that were there, they were hurt. They were hurt, and it's not that we're getting rid of them. They just said we're going to just be doing the job for them, And why should we be here if you're going to do the job for them? Because they take pride in doing the job for us. So, thank you.
Sure, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, a point of clarification, because I just want it very clear because facts can get muddied. The conditional use permit that came forward, the 60 conditions that were attached were negotiated between the applicant and the opponent. Then they were worked with staff and brought forward. It did not come from staff. And back to where things got bogged down, that was the old culture that we had. And again, that's why I'm glad the culture is changing and we can move forward. But it was not our staff that was holding up that. It was a legal process that had to be negotiated between the two parties.
All right, thank you. I will, in light of what's been said, give one more opportunity for public to comment, if any, out there. All right, if not, we can come back with a motion.
Okay.
If any?
Through the mayor.
Yep.
I move to introduce an ordinance update that will amend the Yuba City Municipal Code to allow for direct city council review of use permits by amending sections 8-5.7001 and 8-5.7003 of Article 70 of Chapter 5 of Title 8 and Section 8-5.7101 of Article 71 of Chapter 5 of Title 8 and waive the first reading.
Second.
First and second to approve staff's recommendation. All those in favor, please.
Aye.
And opposed?
Aye.
All right, 4-1 passes. Thank you very much.